The Oklahoma sun shimmered like a sheet of gold over the endless highway, the kind that stretched so far it looked like it might melt into the horizon. The hum of the tires was steady, hypnotic until a faint whimper from the back seat broke the rhythm. 3-year-old Emma sat in her car seat, legs swinging gently, clutching her stuffed bunny, Mr. Fluff, against her chest. Her eyes, big and curious, watched the passing trees blur by. To her, this was supposed to be an adventure. Mommy had told her they were going on a trip. Trips meant fun, ice cream, maybe a new place to see. But today didn't feel like that. Her mother, Lila, sat in the passenger seat beside her husband Carl, her fingers pressed together tightly in her lap. She forced a smile every time Emma caught her gaze in the rearview mirror, but it was brittle, strained. There was something off in the way her smile never quite reached her eyes. Carl drove in silence. He was a man of quiet dominance, thick-shouldered, dark hair cropped neatly, the type of man who didn't need to raise his voice to make others uneasy. His sunglasses hid his eyes, but the way his jaw flexed every few seconds told its own story. Every time Lila shifted or looked at her phone, his grip on the steering wheel tightened just a little. "Are we almost there?" Emma asked softly, her tiny voice floating like a bird in the heavy air. Lila turned slightly. "Soon, baby. Just a little longer." Her voice was gentle but trembling. Carl didn't answer. He stared straight ahead, the faintest smirk pulling at the corner of his mouth. "Yeah," he muttered finally, "we'll be stopping soon." The way he said it made Lila's stomach twist. Outside, the highway signs blurred by. Rest stop, 2 miles. Lila glanced at them, trying to steady her breathing. She'd memorized those signs on the drive, every turn, every stop, just in case she ever got the chance to escape. She had planned it so carefully. 2 nights ago, while Carl was asleep, she'd hidden Emma's documents and her own ID inside her purse. The plan was to take a bus from Oklahoma City the moment Carl went to work Monday morning. She'd even called a friend in Kansas who'd promised to help her start over. But somehow he had found out. The night before, when she'd quietly packed a small bag, Carl had appeared in the doorway without a sound. His voice had been calm, too calm, as he said, "Going somewhere, Lila?" Now, that calm had followed them all the way here. Emma watched the trees roll by, unaware of the storm brewing inside the car. "Mommy?" she said again. "Why are you crying?" Lila blinked fast and wiped her cheek. "Oh, I'm not, sweetheart. Just something in my eye." But Carl's smirk deepened. He reached into the console, pulling out a cigarette, and rolled down the window. The wind rushed in, hot and dry, carrying the faint scent of gasoline and dust. "We'll stop up here," he said suddenly, his tone casual but sharp at the edges. "Emma probably needs to stretch her legs." Lila's pulse quickened. Something about the way he said it, too calm, too controlled, made her blood run cold. The car pulled into the rest stop, a lonely patch of cracked pavement surrounded by pine trees. The sign was faded, the kind you'd see only on forgotten roads. Maple Creek Rest Area. The air shimmered with heat, cicadas buzzing in the distance. There were only 2 other vehicles, a rusted pickup truck near the vending machines and an old, white van parked by the edge of the lot. The van's windows were tinted black. Lila's fingers dug into her seatbelt. Carl parked near the edge of the lot and killed the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. "Get out," he said lightly, without turning his head. Emma unbuckled herself clumsily, humming a tune, oblivious to her mother's rigid posture. She held Mr. Fluff by one ear and followed Lila's hand out the door. The heat hit them instantly. The pavement shimmered like glass under the sun. Carl leaned against the car, dialing his phone. His voice dropped low, almost a growl. Layla strained to hear, but all she caught were fragments. Yeah, we're here now. No, she won't say anything. Her stomach turned to ice. She looked around the empty lot. There was no one in sight. No one to ask for help. Except for Emma, who was now crouched near the vending machine, tapping on the glass and giggling softly at her own reflection. "Mommy, can we get a snack?" Leela smiled weakly. "Maybe in a minute, baby." Her mind was spinning, desperately trying to think. Should she run? Should she grab Emma and hide? But where would she go? Carl ended his call and walked toward them, slipping his phone into his pocket. "We'll be a few minutes," he said smoothly. "Emma, want to see the big trees?" Leela's hand shot out instinctively. "She's fine here," she said quickly, her voice shaking. Carl's smile didn't falter, but his eyes darkened behind the sunglasses. "You're jumpy today, Lila. Relax. You're making her nervous." His hand brushed her shoulder, firm, possessive, and she flinched. "Mommy?" Emma asked softly, her big eyes full of confusion. Leela swallowed hard. "It's okay, sweetie." But the words were only for Emma's sake. Inside, she was screaming. Carl walked toward the white van, his back turned to them. Lila saw him speak to someone inside. A man's shadow moved behind the tinted glass. Her heart pounded so hard she thought she might faint. Emma tugged her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, I don't like that man." Leila crouched, trying to hide her panic behind a smile. "Stay close to me, okay?" Then out of nowhere she heard it. The faint rumble of another engine. Tires crunching on gravel. A dark SUV pulled into the rest area and parked on the opposite side. On the door, the letters read Police K-9 Unit. For a second, Lila couldn't breathe. She glanced toward the van. Carl was still talking, his voice sharp, irritated. A golden retriever jumped out of the SUV, its fur glistening under the sun. It wagged its tail as it looked around, alert but calm. The officer beside it, tall, clean-cut, with a badge glinting on his chest, grabbed a water bottle and tossed a ball for the dog to chase across the lot. Emma's eyes lit up instantly. "Doggy." Leela's heart hammered. Hope flickered for the first time that day. Carl turned abruptly at the sound of the bark. He froze for half a second, his posture tightening. Then he forced a smile and waved casually toward the officer. "Nice dog," he called out. The officer nodded back politely, unaware of the tension in the air. Leela felt her chance slipping through her fingers. Should she run to him? Should she scream? But Carl was watching her closely now. His voice was low and dangerous when he whispered, "Don't even think about it." She froze. Emma's small hand found hers, trembling. The golden retriever, meanwhile, had stopped chasing its ball. Its head turned slightly toward the mother and child. The wagging slowed. The dog's gaze fixed on Emma and stayed there. Emma's breath caught. She looked into those warm brown eyes, and something inside her tiny heart stirred. She remembered something her daycare teacher had told her months ago during a safety lesson. If you're ever scared and can't talk, wave for help. Someone will see you. Her fingers tightened around Mr. Fluff's ear. She glanced up at her mother, whose eyes were glassy with tears she couldn't shed. Then she looked back at the dog. Slowly, timidly, Emma raised her little hand and waved. The dog tilted its head. Its tail dropped slightly. Then it took a few steps forward, watching her carefully. Inside the car, Carl was still distracted by the van. Lila, realizing what her daughter had just done, gasped softly. "Emma," she whispered. But the golden retriever had already seen her. The faintest growl rumbled in its chest, not aggressive, but alert. Its handler, Officer Daniels, turned immediately, sensing something. He looked from the dog to the child, and saw the fear in Emma's eyes. Rex, the canine, barked once, loud and sharp. Carl turned abruptly, his face draining of color. Leela froze. Officer Daniels started walking toward them. And just like that, everything began to change. Officer Daniels moved slowly across the cracked parking lot, his boots crunching gravel with each step. The late morning heat pressed down like a weight. Beside him, the golden retriever, Rex, kept a steady pace, his nose twitching, tail low but tense. Daniels had learned to trust that body language. Rex was trained to detect distress, danger, hidden sense, but sometimes he just knew when something wasn't right. Across the lot, Lila felt the blood drain from her face. Carl had noticed the officer too. His jaw tensed. His hand slid casually into his pocket, where she knew his phone, and possibly his knife, was hidden. "Just smile," he murmured through clenched teeth, his lips barely moving. "Don't say a word you'll regret." Lila nodded automatically, heart hammering. Her palms were slick with sweat as she gripped Emma's small hand. The child's innocent eyes darted from the dog to her mother's trembling face. Officer Daniels gave a polite nod as he approached. "Afternoon," he said, voice calm but firm. "Everything all right here?" Carl turned, forcing a friendly grin. "Oh, sure thing, officer. Just stretching our legs. Long drive, you know how it is." Daniels returned the smile, though his gaze didn't leave the man's posture. Rex stopped beside him, still watching Emma, the dog's head tilted again. His ears perked, then flattened. A soft rumble built in his chest. "Nice dog you've got," Carl added, tone light but eyes hard. "Yeah," Daniels said. "He's the best partner I've got." He crouched slightly to pat Rex's shoulder, but didn't look away from Lila. "Ma'am, you doing okay?" Leela hesitated. For one wild second, she wanted to grab Emma and run straight into that uniform, into safety. But Carl's fingers brushed her arm subtle, threatening. She forced a shaky smile. "Yes, sir. We're fine." Rex whined softly. Daniels caught it. "Mind if I ask where you folks are headed?" "Family visit," Carl said quickly. "Up near Tulsa." Daniels nodded slowly. "That right, ma'am?" Leela's throat tightened. The air around her felt thick, suffocating. She nodded again, barely whispering, "Yes." Rex barked once, sudden and sharp. Daniels felt the leash jerk. The retriever was sniffing toward the car now, circling around the trunk, tail rigid. Carl's tone sharpened. "Hey, officer, is there a problem?" "We didn't do anything." "Relax," Daniels said, straightening up. "He's just curious. Probably smells food." But his eyes were scanning now bruises on Lila's wrist, a faint scrape near her collarbone, the way her shoulders flinched every time Carl shifted. Emma clutched Mr. Fluff tighter, eyes wide. She took a tiny step closer to Rex. The dog glanced at her and wagged his tail once, as if to reassure her. "Pretty hot day to be out here alone," Daniels said conversationally. "You folks break down, or just taking a break?" Carl folded his arms. "Told you. We're just stopping for a minute." "Is that illegal now?" Leela felt Carl's tone harden. She knew that tone smooth ice before the snap. Daniels stayed calm. "Not at all, sir. Just doing my rounds. Rest stops get strange visitors sometimes." He smiled slightly. "Better safe than sorry." Carl gave a dry chuckle, but sweat glistened at his temple. "Yeah, I bet." While they spoke, Emma tugged gently at her mother's hand. "Mommy, Doggie's talking," she whispered. Layla crouched, trying to hush her, but Daniels heard. He knelt too, lowering himself to Emma's height. "Hey there, sweetheart. You like dogs?" Emma nodded shyly. "What's his name?" "Rex," Daniels said. "Rex saw me," she said softly. Something in the way she said it made the officer pause. Did he now? He asked gently. Leela's breath hitched. Carl's voice sliced through the moment. She's just shy, officer. Kids say funny things. Daniel stood slowly. Sure they do. Rex began sniffing near the backseat window. A low growl built again, barely audible, but unmistakable. Carl took a step forward. You mind calling your dog off? He's making my family nervous. Daniels raised an eyebrow. He's trained to react only when he senses something unusual. He doesn't get nervous, mister? Harris, Carl snapped. Carl Harris. Daniels nodded and looked at Lila. And you're Mrs. Harris? Leela's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Carl's hand closed around her arm like a vice. That's right, he said. Rex barked again sharp, twice this time. Daniels had seen this pattern before. He subtly reached to his radio, pressing the side button once without speaking. It sent a silent status check signal to dispatch a habit he'd developed when situations didn't feel right. He crouched beside Rex, whispering, "Easy, boy." What do you smell? The retriever's nose went toward the trunk again, then back to Lila. He whined softly, pressing closer to her leg. Daniel stood. Mind popping the trunk, Mr. Harris? Carl's eyes flickered. Why? Routine check, Daniel said mildly. We've had reports of stolen property being moved along this route. That's ridiculous, Carl snapped. We're not criminals. Then there's no problem, right? A long pause. The cicadas screamed in the silence. Finally, Carl fished his keys out, tossing them toward the car with deliberate slowness. Fine, but you're wasting your time. Daniels walked to the trunk, aware of the tension behind him. He lifted it open, just luggage and a folded blanket on top. But Rex pushed forward, sniffing underneath. Daniels crouched, lifted the blanket and froze. Beneath it was a small purse, half unzipped, containing a stack of papers. Birth certificate, ID, bus ticket dated 3 days ago, and a handwritten note. Kansas City, safe place for Emma. Daniel's heart pounded. He looked up slowly at Lila, whose face had turned ghost white. Carl's voice cut through the air. I said we're leaving. He reached for Lila's wrist again, gripping hard. Sir, Daniel said evenly, I need you to step back. Or what? You think you can? Rex lunged forward, a warning snarl that froze Carl mid-sentence. The man's eyes flicked to the dog's bared teeth, then to the officer's calm but ready stance. Step back. Daniel's voice was steel now. Carl hesitated, then released Lila's arm, sneering. This is harassment. Daniels ignored him. Ma'am, I need you to come with me to the vehicle for a moment. Layla shook her head, terrified. He'll hurt us if... He won't, Daniels said quietly. Not while I'm here. Rex positioned himself between Carl and the two of them, body taut, eyes locked. Lila moved closer to the patrol SUV, clutching Emma to her chest. The little girl's small voice trembled. Mommy, are we safe now? Daniels knelt beside her. You're going to be, sweetheart. I promise. He glanced at his radio again. Dispatch, this is Unit 7 to 14, Maple Creek Rest Stop. Need backup for domestic disturbance, possible abduction situation. Carl's composure shattered. You think you can take my family from me? He shouted, stepping forward. Rex barked furiously, lips curling, stopping him cold. Daniels drew himself up to full height. Stay where you are, sir. The distant wail of sirens answered from the highway. Leela's knees gave out. She sank to the ground, hugging Emma, sobbing silently. When she looked up again, she met the dog's eyes. He wasn't barking anymore. He stood still, tail swaying gently, watching her with something like understanding. And for the first time in months, She believed they might actually live to see tomorrow. The sirens were still distant thin silver streaks of sound, weaving through the pines. But to Lila, they already felt close enough to breathe. She crouched by the open patrol SUV, one arm around Emma, the other clutching her purse, as if it were her lifeline. The hot air shimmered, carrying the smell of gasoline, pine sap, and fear. Officer Daniels stood between them and Carl, his voice steady but his stance ready. Rex was half a step ahead of him, hackles raised, muscles tight beneath golden fur. The dog's eyes never left Carl. Carl's face was a mask of contained fury. "You're making a mistake," he said, his tone low, dangerous. "That woman's hysterical. She lies when she doesn't get her way." Daniels didn't answer. He'd heard every variation of that line in his career. It always meant the same thing. "Sir, I need you to keep your hands where I can see them. I told you you're harassing us." Carl's voice jumped, cracking at the edges. "We're leaving." "You're not," Daniels said. "Not until backup arrives." Carl's eyes flicked toward the van, at the far end of the lot. The engine there coughed once, as if someone inside had just started it. Daniels caught the glance, and his pulse quickened. "Stay right there," he warned. But Carl moved. Not fast, just a single, deliberate step backward. His hand slipped behind his waistband. "Gun!" Daniels shouted. His own weapon cleared its holster in one smooth motion. Rex barked deep, commanding, a sound that rolled like thunder through the still air. The van's door cracked open, a sliver of movement inside. Leela screamed and covered Emma's ears. "Drop it!" Daniels shouted again. "Hands where I can see them." For a heartbeat, everything froze. Cicadas stopped, air stilled, the whole rest stopped hanging on that 1 second. Then Carl lunged not with a gun, but with a knife, small and glinting in the sun. He swung toward Lila. Rex launched before Daniels even moved. The retriever hit Carl mid-torso, knocking him sideways. The blade flew from his hand, skittering across the asphalt. Carl hit the ground hard, yelling, twisting to shove the dog away. But Rex was trained for restraint, not violence. He pinned, growling, holding Carl's arm immobile until Daniels kicked the knife clear and snapped handcuffs over his wrists. "Stay down." Daniels barked. The van door slammed shut. Its tires squealed, dirt spraying as it sped toward the highway. Daniels keyed his radio. "Unit 7 to 14 to all nearby patrol's white van. 2 male occupants, heading north on Route 12. Connection to ongoing domestic case, possibly armed." "Copy that." 7 to 14, came the dispatcher's reply. "Units in pursuit." The sirens drew nearer, echoing off the trees. Carl writhed against the pavement. "You don't understand," he gasped. "She was going to take my kid." Daniels stared down at him. "Looks to me like you were the one taking her somewhere she didn't want to go." He turned. Lila was still kneeling beside the SUV, trembling. Emma clung to her like a shadow. When she looked up at Daniels, her lips parted, but no words came out, only a sob that tore free after months of silence. "It's over," he said softly. "You're safe now." Rex padded over, tail low, panting. His fur glistened with sweat and dust. Emma slipped from her mother's grasp and threw her tiny arms around his neck. The dog froze for half a second, then leaned into her hug. Leela pressed a shaking hand to her mouth. The world had gone strangely quiet again, the way it sometimes does after a storm. Only the hum of cicadas returned, indifferent witnesses to what had just happened. Within minutes, 2 more cruisers rolled in, lights flashing red and blue against the green pines. Officers poured out, taking Carl into custody, photographing the knife, collecting the scattered papers from Lila's purse. The van that had fled was intercepted 10 miles up the road, Daniels heard it over the radio while giving his report. Everything matched what Lila would later confirm. Carl had planned to hand her and Emma over to someone who would keep them out of sight until he could disappear with the money in her name. When she heard that, Lila's knees buckled. Daniels caught her before she hit the ground. "You did the right thing calling out for help," he said. "I didn't," she whispered. "I was too scared." He looked down at Emma, still hugging Rex. Then maybe someone else did. Emma looked up, cheeks streaked with tears but smiling faintly. "Doggy saw me," she said. Daniels crouched beside her. "He sure did. He's pretty smart, huh?" She nodded solemnly. "He talks with his heart." For the first time all day, Lila laughed a small broken sound, but laughter all the same. It cracked the shell of terror around her chest. One of the younger officers approached. "We'll take them into the station for statements, Sergeant. Enns is on the way to check her wrist." Daniels nodded. "Good." He looked at Lila. "You'll both ride with me. Rex wouldn't forgive me if I let anyone else drive you." Emma giggled. The sound was light, pure, and somehow brave. The drive to the station was quiet. Emma sat between her mother and the dog, who sprawled peacefully in the back of the SUV, head resting on her lap. The child traced small circles on his fur, whispering secrets only he could hear. Outside, the Oklahoma plains blurred past miles of freedom neither of them had felt in a long time. Lila stared out the window, mind a storm of disbelief. Every breath hurt, but it was the kind of hurt that meant she was still alive. "You'll be okay," Daniels said from the driver's seat. "We'll get you in touch with the county advocate tonight. You don't have to go back." She nodded slowly. "I kept telling myself there was no way out," she murmured. "But there was. It just had fur and 4 legs." Daniels smiled. "That's Rex for you." In the rearview mirror, he saw Emma resting her head against the dog's shoulder, thumb in her mouth, eyes drifting shut. The image burned itself into his memory, the innocence that had somehow survived all that fear. By the time they reached the sheriff's office, the sun was lowering behind the trees, painting the sky in soft orange. Lila stepped out carefully, still shaky. Officers moved around them, paperwork, radios, the noise of procedure. But to her, everything else was distant. Only Emma and Rex seemed real. She knelt beside the retriever, running a trembling hand through his fur. "You saved my daughter," she whispered. "You saved us both." Rex lifted his head, eyes gentle. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. His tail brushed the ground once, twice. Daniels came around the SUV. "He has that effect on people," he said quietly. "But don't forget, you waved first, remember? That's what made him look." Lila looked up, tears catching the last of the sunlight. "No," she said. She waved. Daniels glanced at the little girl now curled asleep against his partner's flank. "Then your daughter might be the bravest kid I've ever met." That night, while paperwork was filed and statements recorded, Daniels brought Rex a bowl of water and sat beside him in the quiet hallway outside the interview room. Through the open door, he could hear Lila's voice breaking as she told the detective everything: years of isolation, the threats, the failed attempts to leave. Every word made him grip Rex's collar a little tighter. "Good boy," he murmured. "You did real good today." Rex lifted his head, licking his handler's wrist before lying back down, satisfied. Inside the interview room, Lila's voice steadied as she finished. "If your officer hadn't stopped, if that dog hadn't looked at her." She couldn't finish. The detective nodded, eyes soft. "You're safe now. We'll help you start over." Lila glanced through the doorway at the dog curled on the floor. "I think he already did." And in the half-lit hallway, Officer Daniels smiled into the quiet, one hand resting on Rex's broad back. He'd seen plenty of darkness in his career, but that day, at a lonely rest stop on a forgotten highway, a 3-year-old girl and a golden retriever had reminded him what light looked like. The clock on the sheriff's office wall ticked past 10 p.m., its steady rhythm filling the quiet hum of the small town precinct. Most of the officers had gone home, leaving the place wrapped in a strange calm that comes only after chaos. Papers rustled, phones buzzed occasionally, and from somewhere in the back room came the low, steady snoring of a tired police dog. Emma sat wrapped in a fleece blanket, her small frame swallowed by its warmth. She sat on a worn leather couch in the corner of the sheriff's office lobby, her head resting against her mother's shoulder. Lila's hair was damp. She had just washed the dirt and sweat from her face in the small restroom down the hall, but her eyes remained red, rimmed with exhaustion and something deeper, relief mixed with disbelief. Across from them sat Officer Daniels, nursing a cup of coffee gone cold. Rex lay stretched at his feet, eyes half open, still alert even in rest. The golden retriever's chest rose and fell steadily, but every so often his ears twitched at some sound only he could hear. No one had spoken for a while. It wasn't an awkward silence. It was the kind that comes after surviving something unthinkable. "Emma," Daniels said finally, his voice low, gentle. "Do you want some hot chocolate? We've got some in the break room." Emma blinked up at him, her thumb hovering near her mouth. She looked at her mother first, as if needing permission for every choice in this new world. Lila nodded softly. "Yes, please," the little girl whispered. Daniels smiled and rose. "I'll be right back." As his footsteps faded down the hall, Lila turned to her daughter. "You okay, baby?" Emma nodded, though her eyes were still wide with that faraway look children sometimes get after they've seen too much. "Doggie's brave," she murmured. "He jumped like in the movies." Lila's throat tightened. "He sure did." Emma shifted closer, laying her head against her mother's chest. "Mommy, can we keep him?" Lila let out a broken laugh, half sob, half smile. "He already has a home, sweetheart." Emma frowned a little. "But maybe we can visit him?" Before Lila could answer, Daniels returned with a steaming mug topped with tiny marshmallows. "Here we go," he said. "Made it special. Don't tell the chief I used the last of the cocoa." Emma took it carefully, her little hands wrapped around the cup. She smiled, and for a moment, the station didn't feel like a place of fear anymore. It felt like safety. Daniels sat back down. "We've got the men from the van in custody," he said quietly, his eyes on Lila. "They confessed to everything. Carl was planning to hand you over to a group that helps people disappear for a price. But what he didn't know was, we've been tracking them for months. You and Emma helped us bring them down." Lila's lips parted in shock. I helped?" Daniels nodded. "That signal at the rest stop, that was the break we needed. Without it, they might have gotten away." Lila shook her head slowly, her gaze distant. "All I did was freeze. I couldn't even scream." Daniels leaned forward. "You didn't have to. Your daughter did. She saw you needed help and found a way to ask for it. That's not freezing, that's courage." Lila turned to Emma, who was now busy feeding a marshmallow to Rex, giggling softly when he took it gently from her fingers. The sight broke something open in her. She pressed a hand over her mouth, tears spilling again, not of fear this time, but gratitude. "I thought she'd never talk again," Lila whispered. "After everything after all the shouting, the nights she'd hide under the bed." Daniels nodded, his jaw tightening. "Kids are stronger than we think. Sometimes they just need one reason to believe the world's not all bad." Rex wagged his tail at the sound of his name, as if sensing the weight lifting from the air. The following morning dawned golden and soft over the Oklahoma plains. The sheriff's office parking lot glowed under the early sun, dew glittering on car roofs. Inside, the mood had shifted lighter, more alive. Lila stood near the counter, signing papers with a county advocate beside her. Her wrists were bandaged, and she moved carefully, but there was a steadiness in her now. She was being checked into a temporary shelter for survivors, with a program that would help her find work and a new place to live. Emma played nearby with Rex, who rolled on his back as she giggled uncontrollably. The entire department had fallen a little bit in love with her overnight. Even the grizzled sergeant who'd been on the force for 30 years had slipped her a lollipop earlier that morning. When the paperwork was done, Daniels walked them to his SUV. "We'll drive you to the shelter," he said. "It's just outside town. Quiet place, safe." Lila hesitated, looking at him. "How do I even thank you for this?" He shook his head. "You already did. You gave that little girl a chance at a life without fear. That's thanks enough." As they drove, Emma hung softly in the back seat. Rex rested beside her again, his head in her lap. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, sunlight breaking through clouds like blessings. "Officer?" Emma said suddenly. "Yeah, Peanut?" Daniels replied, smiling through the mirror. "Does Doggy get medals?" He chuckled. "Sometimes, when they're extra brave." "Then he should get one," she said firmly. "He saved Mommy." Daniels met Lila's eyes in the rearview mirror. There was warmth there, something unspoken, something that felt like hope. The shelter was a small, renovated farmhouse surrounded by trees and laughter, other families rebuilding, other children learning to trust again. As Lila and Emma stepped out, a woman with kind eyes welcomed them inside. Rex whined softly as they said goodbye. Emma hugged him tight, burying her face in his fur. "I'll see you again, right?" Daniels crouched beside them. "You can visit him at the station any time. He'll be waiting." She looked up, serious. "Can I write him letters?" He smiled. "Absolutely." As they drove away, Rex sat upright in the back of the SUV, watching through the window until the shelter disappeared from sight. Daniels reached back, patting his partner's head. "You did good, buddy. Better than all of us." Rex turned his head slightly, tail thumping once against the seat. Back at the station, life slowly returned to routine. Reports were filed, press inquiries came in, and for once, the story making headlines wasn't about tragedy. It was about hope. "Police dog and 3-year-old foil abduction at Oklahoma rest stop," read one newspaper. Another headline called Emma, the little hero who waved for help. Daniels tried to brush off the attention. But when he saw the photo a shot of Rex beside Emma, both smiling under the fluorescent lights of the station, he couldn't help but grin. "You're famous, partner," he told Rex. "Better not let it go to your head." The dog barked once, as if in agreement, before curling back up under his desk for a nap. That night, Daniels stayed late, typing his final report. His desk lamp cast a warm circle of light across the paperwork, but his thoughts drifted beyond the words, to the image of a tiny hand waving from behind a car window, and a golden retriever's instinct to stop. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the soft breathing of his partner nearby. Sometimes, he thought, miracles didn't look like lightning or fire. They looked like a 3-year-old girl who still believed in good, and a dog who saw what no one else did. And in that quiet Oklahoma night, Officer Daniels felt something rare, peace. 2 months later, the Oklahoma air had turned crisp. The summer heat had retreated, leaving behind golden leaves and a town that still talked about the little girl and the dog. The story had traveled far beyond the county line, picked up by local news, then state outlets, and finally, by national morning shows that replayed that single heart-stopping moment, a 3-year-old's wave, and a police dog's instinct to stop. For Lila and Emma, though, fame meant little. They were living in a quiet safe house on the edge of Tulsa, small, clean, peaceful. Every night, Lila tucked Emma in under a quilt donated by the shelter staff and whispered the same promise: "We're safe now, my love. Forever safe." But even peace had its shadows. The court case against Carl and his accomplices had begun. Lila had been called as a witness, though the thought of facing him again made her stomach twist. The district attorney, a kind woman named Julia Harper, had spent weeks preparing her testimony. Still, Lila's hands shook every time she imagined walking into that courtroom. Emma, meanwhile, had grown stronger. She was talking more, laughing more. The nightmares had faded. She drew pictures, now hundreds of them, most of them of Rex. Golden fur, bright eyes, and always a small stick in his mouth. "Because he's happy," she'd say when asked. And yet, whenever she asked when she could see him again, Lila didn't know what to say. The courthouse in Tulsa was old, its stone walls holding decades of stories, some tragic, some redemptive. On the morning of the hearing, the hallways buzzed with quiet tension. Reporters gathered outside, their cameras poised. Everyone wanted to see the woman and the child who had survived something unspeakable, and the police dog whose instincts had made national news. Inside, Officer Daniels stood beside Rex in the corner of the courtroom. The dog wore a clean vest marked Police K-9 and sat calmly, eyes alert. Daniels rested a hand on his head, his thumb brushing behind his ear. "You ready, buddy?" he whispered. Rex gave a low, reassuring sound somewhere between a whine and a sigh. When the door opened and Lila entered, holding Emma's hand, the room hushed. She looked fragile, yet determined, dressed simply, her hair pulled back. Emma clutched a small stuffed toy version of Rex that one of the officers had sent her weeks ago. She walked with the quiet confidence of someone who'd faced monsters and learned that light still existed. Carl sat at the defense table, wrists chained, his face pale and angry. But when his gaze met Lila's, something in her eyes had changed. There was no fear left there, only strength. The judge entered, and the trial began. Lila's testimony was slow, halting at first. She recounted the years of isolation, the control, the fear, the night she decided to leave. Her voice trembled when she described the rest, stop of silence, the heat, the moment she thought it was all over. And then, Julia Harper prompted gently, "What happened?" Lila took a deep breath. "My daughter?" She waved. The courtroom was silent. She waved out the window. I don't even think she knew why. Maybe she just wanted someone to see her. Her eyes flickered to Rex, lying quietly at Daniels's feet. And he did. That dog saw her. He knew something was wrong before any human could. Julia nodded. And what happened next? Lila's voice broke. He saved us. The jury listened in stillness. Even the court stenographer paused for a heartbeat. When the defense attorney cross-examined her, his tone was sharp. "Mrs. Harlow, isn't it true you didn't call for help? That you never tried to leave before?" Lila's chin lifted. "You don't understand fear," she said quietly. "It doesn't whisper logic. It chains you. But that day, my daughter broke those chains for both of us." The attorney hesitated, thrown off by her poise. The judge leaned forward. "Proceed carefully, counselor." And from the corner, Rex gave a low, almost imperceptible growl, a warning as natural as breathing. The gallery chuckled softly, tension easing for the first time in hours. When it was Emma's turn to take the stand, everyone held their breath. She was too young to testify formally, but the judge allowed a brief, informal session more to verify her well-being than to question her memory. Daniels escorted her to the front. Rex padded beside her, tail wagging lightly. The sight of him, drew a wave of smiles through the courtroom. Emma's face lit up. "Doggy," she gasped softly, running forward to hug him. Rex leaned down, licking her cheek. The judge, an older man with kind eyes, couldn't help smiling. "I see someone remembers her friend." Emma nodded, holding Rex's fur. "He saved me. He's my hero." A murmur rippled through the room, some people wiping tears, others smiling at the purity of her voice. "Do you remember what you did that day, Emma?" asked Julia Harper, crouching beside her. Emma thought for a moment. "Mommy was scared. I wanted someone to see. So I waved. And who saw you?" "Doggy did," she said simply. "He's smart. He saw my heart." Even the judge blinked rapidly, pretending to adjust his glasses. Carl's fate was sealed long before the verdict. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned, the courtroom was hushed again. "We find the defendant guilty on all charges," the forewoman announced. Lila's shoulders slumped with relief. Tears streamed down her face as Emma squeezed her hand. Carl's head dropped. The sound of the gavel echoed like thunder through the chamber. It was over. Finally, truly over. Rex gave a quiet bark, sensing the emotion around him. Daniels smiled, scratching his partner's neck. "You did it again, pal," he whispered. Lila walked over to them, trembling. "Officer Daniels?" "Rex," her voice broke. "Thank you." Daniels shook his head. "You too did the hard part." She knelt, embracing Rex tightly. Emma joined her, wrapping her small arms around both her mother and the dog. Cameras flashed from the back of the room, but no photo could ever capture what that moment truly meant. For the first time in years, Lila wasn't surviving. She was living. In the weeks that followed, the story spread everywhere. Morning shows invited them on air. Magazines ran headlines, like the 3-year-old who waved for help, and the dog who saw the signal. Daniels didn't care much for the spotlight, but he couldn't deny what it did. It raised awareness for domestic violence, for early warning programs, and for the bond between police dogs and their communities. Donations poured into the local K-9 unit. And then, one afternoon, a brown envelope arrived at the station. Inside was a crayon drawing, Rex with a golden crown, and next to him, a smiling little girl holding his paw. Underneath, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "To my best friend Rex, the bravest dog ever. Love, Emma." Daniels pinned it to the station bulletin board. Every officer who walked past smiled. A month later, on a quiet Saturday, he and Rex drove to the shelter where Lila and Emma had moved. When Emma saw them pull up, she ran barefoot across the grass, laughter echoing through the air. "Doggy," she cried. Rex barked, tail wagging furiously. He bounded toward her, the two of them colliding in a blur of joy and sunlight. Lila stood on the porch, watching through tears. Daniels walked up beside her. "She's doing better," he said softly. "She's free," Lila whispered. "And so am I." They watched as Emma rolled in the grass with Rex, both of them laughing in their own ways, the kind of laughter that sounds like healing. And in that golden afternoon, it was clear, this wasn't just a story about survival. It was a story about being seen, about a child's courage, a mother's rebirth, and a dog who didn't need words to understand either. Autumn turned to winter, but for the first time in a long while, the cold didn't bite as harshly. For Lila and Emma, the days had begun to follow a peaceful rhythm. Breakfast in the bright kitchen of the shelter house, afternoon walks near the trees, bedtime stories whispered in soft light. The nightmares that once came nightly now visited only rarely, and when they did, Emma no longer woke up screaming. She'd reach for her mother's hand, and it would be there, warm, steady, safe. But beyond that small circle of calm, the world had not forgotten their story. The footage from the Tulsa courthouse had gone viral. Millions had watched as a 3-year-old girl testified with her tiny hand wrapped around a golden retriever's paw. They saw her say, "He saw my heart." Those 5 words had echoed across the country. Morning talk shows, podcasts, even late-night comedians had quoted her. Social media overflowed with posts tagged #He saw my heart, a symbol of courage, kindness, and the uncanny bond between humans and animals. And so, one crisp December morning, a letter arrived for Officer Daniels. It bore the official seal of the governor of Oklahoma. Inside, typed neatly on gold-bordered paper, was an invitation. In recognition of extraordinary bravery and instinct in the protection of human life, the state of Oklahoma wishes to honor Canine Officer Rex and the individuals whose courage inspired millions. At the bottom was the date of the ceremony, 2 weeks away. Daniels looked down at his partner, who was chewing absently on a rubber toy under the desk. "Well, looks like you're going to be famous again, bud." Rex paused, looked up with calm brown eyes, and wagged his tail. Fame meant nothing to him. Treats, however, might. When Lila received the call, she hesitated. She hadn't been in front of cameras since the trial. But this time, the fear wasn't the same. It wasn't about being seen for her pain, but for her strength. She looked down at Emma, who was coloring at the kitchen table. "Sweetheart," she began carefully, "they want us to go to Oklahoma City. They're giving Rex a medal." Emma's eyes widened. "A medal? Like superheroes?" Leela smiled. "Something like that." Emma put her crayon down. "Then we have to go." That was that. The day of the ceremony dawned clear and cold, the sky a flawless winter blue. The Capitol's marble steps gleamed under the sunlight, lined with uniformed officers, photographers, and television crews. A crowd had gathered, families, reporters, local schoolchildren waving flags. When Officer Daniels stepped out of his cruiser, Rex trotting proudly beside him, applause rippled through the air. The golden retriever looked majestic in his polished vest, a small American flag pin attached near his name tag. Daniels, though uncomfortable in his formal uniform, couldn't help smiling at the sight of his partner's calm composure. Moments later, Lila and Emma arrived. The little girl wore a pale yellow dress with a matching ribbon in her hair, holding a small handmade card that said, "For my hero Rex." When she spotted the dog, she ran full speed across the marble courtyard. Cameras flashed, but no one cared. The sight was too pure to interrupt. "Doggy," Emma cried, throwing her arms around his neck. Rex wagged furiously, licking her face until she giggled uncontrollably. Leela stood behind them, tears in her eyes. She caught Daniels's gaze and mouthed a simple, heartfelt thank you. The ceremony began with speeches. The governor, the police chief, the district attorney who'd handled Carl's case. Each spoke of courage, instinct, and the extraordinary chain of events that had started with a child's wave and a dog's response. But when the governor stepped to the podium for the final address, he turned toward the little girl sitting proudly beside Rex. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice echoing across the courtyard. "Sometimes the greatest acts of heroism come not from strength, but from innocence. This story reminds us that bravery can look like a wave, and compassion can look like a dog that refuses to keep driving." He paused, glancing down at Emma. "Young lady, would you join me up here?" A murmur of delight spread through the crowd. Layla hesitated, but Emma was already standing. She marched to the front with all the seriousness a 3-year-old could muster, clutching her card tightly. Daniels gave her a reassuring wink as she passed. The governor crouched to her level. "Emma," he said gently, "your wave saved your mom's life. And it helped a lot of other people, too." Do you know what bravery means? Emma tilted her head. It means not being scared? Not exactly, he smiled. It means being scared, but doing something good anyway. She thought about that, then nodded. Like Rex. The crowd laughed softly, teary-eyed. The governor turned to the podium, lifting a small velvet box. Inside gleamed a polished bronze medal, shaped like a paw print. For outstanding bravery and instinct in the line of duty, he read, "The state of Oklahoma awards Canine Officer Rex the Medal of Valor." The crowd erupted in applause as he placed the medal around the retriever's neck. Cameras flashed, cheers echoed. Rex blinked calmly, tail wagging, a very picture of quiet grace. Emma beamed up at him, whispering, "You did it, doggy." Then, in a moment that melted every heart in the audience, she lifted her handmade card and handed it to the governor. "This one's from me," she said. He took it carefully, unfolding the crayon drawing of Rex with sparkles and hearts. Written in big, wobbly letters was, "For seeing my heart." The governor's voice cracked as he read it aloud. The crowd stood, not just clapping now, but cheering. Leela covered her mouth, overwhelmed. Daniels blinked hard, pretending something had gotten into his eye. Even the stone-faced officers along the steps smiled through tears. That evening, news anchors across the country replayed the ceremony. Headlines glowed. K9 Rex honored for heroic rescue. 3-year-old's words bring nation to tears. Clips flooded the internet, Emma's tiny voice saying, "Like Rex," and the moment the medal gleamed in the sun. But for the people who had lived it, the real story wasn't about medals or speeches. It was about what came next. When the ceremony ended and the cameras turned off, Daniels, Lila, Emma, and Rex walked through the quiet gardens behind the Capitol. The crowd was gone. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft gold. Emma skipped ahead, holding Rex's leash proudly. "Mommy," she said, "do you think Doggy knows he's a hero?" Leela smiled. "I think he knows you love him. And maybe that's all heroes really need to know." Daniels chuckled softly. "He's got a medal now, but between you and me, he's mostly thinking about dinner." Emma laughed, spinning in circles. "Then he can have my ice cream." Rex barked once, as if in agreement. They reached the reflecting pool at the edge of the garden. For a long moment, the four of them stood quietly, their reflections glowing in the water. The survivor, the child, the officer, and the dog who had changed everything. Leela exhaled deeply. "You know," she said softly, "I spent years thinking the world was cruel, but now I think maybe it's full of people like you." Daniels glanced at her, his expression gentle. "And little girls like her," he said. "Don't forget that part." Rex leaned against Emma's side, tail brushing the ground. She reached up to touch the medal hanging from his neck and whispered, "Good job, doggy." The golden retriever closed his eyes for a second, as if he understood. That night, as they drove home, Emma fell asleep in the backseat, her hand resting on Rex's fur. The medal caught the streetlights as they passed, gleaming quietly in the dark. Daniels glanced at them in the mirror. "You know," he said softly, "I've been on this job 15 years, and I've never seen a miracle up close before." Lila looked over, her eyes shining. "You did that day," she said. "You just didn't know it was coming from a 3-year-old. He smiled. "Guess heroes come in all sizes." Outside, snow began to fall, soft, gentle flakes dusting the windshield. And as the cruiser rolled down the empty highway, the only sound was the rhythm of breathing. One tired officer, one peaceful mother, one sleeping child, and one golden dog whose heart had seen what no one else could. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest memories, but some moments never fade. They simply transform. For Lila and Emma, The years following that winter ceremony unfolded like the pages of a book written by Grace. The shelter where they had once sought refuge became their home for another year, until Lila found steady work at a community counseling center. Her experiences gave her a rare gift, empathy wrapped in strength. She began helping women who came in with haunted eyes and trembling hands, the same way she once had. Every time she spoke to a frightened mother, she remembered the highway rest stop, the little wave, and the golden dog who saw more than anyone else did. Emma, meanwhile, grew like a wildflower, full of light, energy, and laughter. Her curls bounced when she ran, her voice was always full of curiosity, and her heart, as everyone liked to say, was too big for her age. She often drew pictures of Rex, him sitting proudly with his medal, her holding his leash, both surrounded by big pink hearts and sparkly stars. Rex, the hero himself, continued to serve with Officer Daniels. Though he was nearing the end of his active duty years, his instincts never dulled. Children adored him. Schools invited him for safety demonstrations, and he somehow became the unofficial mascot of the Tulsa Police Department. Everywhere they went, people recognized him. "That's the dog who saved the little girl," they'd whisper. Daniels would nod modestly, always replying, "He just did what good hearts do." 5 years later, on a bright spring afternoon, Daniels and Rex visited Emma's elementary school for Community Heroes Day. The gym was filled with excited chatter, firemen in helmets, nurses in scrubs, even a local pilot showing off his flight cap. But when Daniels entered with Rex at his side, the entire room erupted in applause. Emma, now 8 years old, sat in the front row, her eyes wide and sparkling. She hadn't seen Rex in almost 2 years, and when she did, she couldn't help but rush forward. "Rex!" she shouted, her voice ringing across the hall. The golden retriever barked once, deep, warm, familiar. His tail thumped like a drum against the polished floor as she threw her arms around him. Daniel smiled. "He remembers you, kiddo. Hard to forget your first rescue." Emma giggled. "I missed you so much." Rex licked her cheek, and the entire gym seemed to melt in a collective awe. When Daniel spoke to the children, he didn't talk about crime or danger. Instead, he told them about listening to your heart. "Sometimes," he said, resting a hand on Rex's back, "you'll see something that doesn't feel right. You'll feel it here." He tapped his chest. "And that's your heart's way of saying, do something good." That's what this guy did. And it's what Emma did too. All eyes turned to her. Emma blushed, but she smiled proudly. After the event, one teacher approached Lila with tears in her eyes. "I have a student who's been through a lot," she said softly. But after hearing Emma's story, she told me she wants to draw her own heart signal, just in case she ever needs help. Lila's throat tightened. "That's exactly why we tell it," she whispered. As the years passed, Emma's story traveled far beyond Oklahoma. Documentaries were made, children's books were written, and even the U.S. Department of Justice highlighted the case as an example of how therapy dogs and trained K-9 units could support child witnesses in trauma cases. The phrase, "He saw my heart," became the motto for a national campaign on animal-assisted rescue training. Police dogs across the country began wearing new tags stamped with a tiny heart symbol. And through it all, Rex kept working, until one spring morning when Daniels noticed something was different. Rex's pace had slowed. His once boundless energy now carried a gentle rhythm. The veteran officer knew the signs. Every canine handler did. It was time for retirement. The department held a small ceremony, nothing as grand as before, just officers, friends, and a handful of people whose lives Rex had touched. Daniels kneeled before his partner, brushing a hand through the golden fur. "You've done your duty, old friend," he whispered. You've more than earned your rest." Rex looked up at him, eyes still bright, as if saying, "I'd do it all again." Afterward, Daniels placed a call to Lila. "There's something I think you should know," he said. "Rex is retiring, and I think he should spend the rest of his days with someone who really understands what he did." Lila went silent for a moment, her voice trembling. "You mean with us?" Daniels chuckled. "He already chose you a long time ago." When Rex arrived at their small suburban home a week later, Emma was 12. She ran barefoot across the yard, her laughter echoing like music. "Rex, you're home." The dog bounded toward her. Slower, yes, but with the same joy that had once carried him across a highway to a frightened little girl. She hugged him tightly, tears wetting his fur. "You saved me," she whispered. "Now it's my turn." From that day on, Rex became part of the family. His favorite spot was by the fireplace, where Emma often sat doing homework or sketching. She even started writing stories, always about animals, always about courage. And every year, on the anniversary of the rescue, they visited that same rest stop. It had been renovated since then. New signs, fresh paint, even a small memorial plaque near the benches. It read, "In honor of Canine Rex, who saw the heart no one else could. Dedicated to the power of courage, compassion, and the bond between a child and a dog." Emma would sit there quietly, her fingers tracing the letters. Lila would stand behind her, hand resting on her shoulder. Sometimes travelers stopped to ask about the plaque, and when they learned the story, their expressions would soften, strangers briefly bound by a moment of shared humanity. Rex's final years were peaceful, full of love and comfort. He grew slower, his muzzle silvered with age, but his eyes never lost that warm, knowing light. On quiet evenings, Emma would lie beside him, reading aloud from her notebooks. "Want to hear my new story, Rex?" she'd ask, flipping through pages. "It's about a dog who could hear hearts instead of barks." He'd wag his tail just once and close his eyes as her voice carried softly through the room. When the day finally came that he didn't wake up, the world felt still. Daniels came over, his eyes damp as he helped Lila and Emma bury their hero under the old oak tree in their backyard. They placed his medal beside him, and Emma tucked one of her drawings under his paw, the same heart signal she'd drawn the first time. "I'll keep being brave," she whispered. "Like you taught me." A gentle breeze moved through the leaves, almost like a sigh. The weeks that followed were quiet, but not empty. Letters began arriving, from children, schools, even police departments. Each one told a story, a rescue, a kindness, a moment of courage inspired by Rex. One little boy from Maine wrote, "I waved at a police car when I was scared. They stopped. Thank you for teaching me that good people listen." Another from California sent a picture of her therapy dog wearing a heart tag. "For Rex," she wrote. And one from a shelter in Kansas said simply, "We started naming our rescue dogs after heroes. Our first one is named Rex." Lila read them all aloud to Emma, and though tears often fell, there was always a smile waiting right behind them. Years later, when Emma graduated high school, she gave a short speech at the ceremony. She stood on stage in a blue gown, her voice steady and clear. "When I was 3, a dog saved my life," she began. "But what he really saved was my belief that people and animals can be good even when the world isn't." She paused, looking toward the sky. "He saw my heart when I couldn't show it. And now I want to see others the same way." The audience rose in applause, and for a moment, she swore she could hear the faint, familiar sound of a tail thumping in approval. 15 years had passed since that winter day when a frightened little girl waved for help at a highway rest stop. Time had reshaped the world around Emma, but deep down, that moment, that small, trembling wave still pulsed quietly in her heart. Now 20 years old, Emma stood at the gates of the Rex Foundation for Courage and Compassion, a modest but radiant building nestled on the outskirts of Tulsa. The morning sun glinted off its glass facade, where etched above the main entrance were the words that had once defined a nation's tears and triumph. He saw my heart. It had started as a dream. After Rex's passing, Emma had spent years volunteering at shelters and therapy programs. She'd seen countless animals, frightened, broken, abandoned, and she'd seen something else too, the way they looked at people, the way they listened. It reminded her of him. So when she finished high school, she decided to build something in his name. With the help of Officer Daniels, her mother, and countless supporters who remembered their story, the foundation was born. Part rescue center, part therapy training facility, part education hub for children learning empathy through animals. And today was the grand opening. The parking lot was full. Families, officers, rescue workers, teachers, reporters, they all gathered beneath strings of lights and banners fluttering in the gentle wind. A golden retriever statue stood proudly in the courtyard, wearing a bronze replica of Rex's medal. At its base, engraved words read, "Dedicated to every soul who listens to hearts unseen." Emma smoothed her navy blue blazer, feeling the weight of emotion press against her chest. She had practiced her speech a dozen times, but now that the moment was here, words seemed too small. Her mother stepped beside her, still graceful, still warm. Layla placed a steady hand on her daughter's shoulder. "He'd be proud," she whispered. "So proud." Emma swallowed hard. "I just wish he could see it." Layla smiled. "Oh, he can. You built it with him in your heart. That's how love works." Nearby, Officer Daniels adjusted his tie, looking slightly uncomfortable in formal clothes as always. His hair had gone silver, but his eyes were still kind. When he caught Emma's gaze, he gave her a small nod, the same nod he'd given her as a child, back in the courthouse all those years ago. "Ready to open the doors, kiddo?" he asked. Emma grinned. "Let's do it." The ceremony began with quiet applause. A local news anchor took the stage first, recounting the story that had once shaken and inspired the nation. A little girl's silent cry for help, a mother's courage, and a dog whose instincts changed everything. And Emma stepped forward. The crowd hushed. She looked out over the faces before her, strangers, friends, survivors, officers, and dozens of children sitting cross-legged in the front row, each one holding a small paper heart with a paw print in the center. She took a deep breath. "When I was 3, she began, I didn't know what courage meant. I only knew that my heart was scared, and I hoped someone could see it. And he did." Her voice trembled slightly. "A dog named Rex saw my heart when no one else could. And that changed everything. Not just for me, but for so many others." She glanced at the children in the front row. Sometimes bravery doesn't look like what we imagine. It's not loud, it's not big. Sometimes it's a whisper, or a wave, or a quiet bark. It's something small that grows into something huge. Behind her, a large screen flickered to life, showing photos. Rex during his K9 years, the courthouse day, the Medal of Valor ceremony, and Emma as a child hugging him in the snow. "He taught me that animals don't just see what we do," she continued softly. "They see who we are. That's why this foundation exists, to give others the same chance I had, to connect hearts that need to be seen." Applause rippled gently through the crowd. After the ribbon cutting, Emma led the first tour through the facility. The front hall featured murals of service animals, dogs, horses, even cats, alongside quotes about compassion and bravery. One wall displayed letters from children across the country who'd been inspired by Rex's story. A little girl stopped to point at one. "Look, Mommy. This one's from me." Emma crouched beside her. "You wrote that?" The child nodded proudly. "My dog's name is Rex, too. He helps me sleep when I have bad dreams." Emma smiled, tears stinging her eyes. "Then you both have brave hearts." Later, as the crowd thinned and the evening sun painted everything gold, Emma slipped outside to the quiet memorial garden. The bronze statue shimmered in the light, and the wind rustled the nearby oak trees. One of them, grown from a sapling Lila had planted years ago, taken from the tree under which Rex was buried. Emma knelt beside the statue, her fingers brushing the cool metal of the paw print. "We did it, boy," she whispered. "You still save people." Every single day. For a long moment, she stayed there, silent, peaceful. Then, faintly, she heard laughter behind her. She turned to see Daniels walking with a new golden retriever pup at his side, bright-eyed, wagging, full of life. "Meet Scout," Daniels said. "Fresh out of canine training. Thought I'd bring him by to meet the legend's protege." Emma smiled, kneeling to greet the pup. "He's beautiful." Scout sniffed her hand, then gently licked her palm. For a second, just a second, Emma swore she saw that same light, that same knowing warmth she'd once seen in Rex's eyes. She blinked back tears. "Hello, Scout," she whispered. "Welcome to the family." Daniels chuckled. "Looks like he already approves of you." "Maybe he sees my heart," she said, smiling through tears. "Maybe," Daniels replied softly, his voice full of meaning. As twilight settled over the foundation, the lights along the pathway flickered on. Families lingered, children played in the garden, and therapy dogs rolled in the grass. The golden statue gleamed beneath the setting sun, a silent guardian watching over a world it had helped change. Inside the main hall, a large mural caught the last rays of light. It showed a little girl waving across a highway, a golden dog standing tall beside her, and a caption below that read, "Bravery begins with a heartbeat." Emma stood beneath it, her mother's arm around her shoulders, watching as volunteers guided visitors through the new rooms, one for animal therapy, one for canine education, and one called the Heart Room, where children could draw or talk about their fears safely. "This place is beautiful," Lila whispered. Emma nodded, her voice soft. "It's not just for us anymore. It's for everyone who ever needed someone to see their heart." Later that night, after everyone had gone, Emma sat on the steps outside the building. The stars were out, quiet, steady, eternal. A cool breeze brushed her face, and she closed her eyes, letting it wash over her. And then, faintly, she heard it, the soft jingle of a tag, the sound of paws on stone, the warm rhythm of a tail against the ground. Her heart stilled. "Rex?" she whispered into the dark. No answer came, of course, only the whisper of wind through the trees. But somehow, deep inside, she knew he was there, watching, listening. A tear rolled down her cheek, but it wasn't from sadness. It was peace. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight kissed the building, a group of schoolchildren arrived for their first compassion workshop. Emma greeted them at the door, smiling brightly. "Welcome to the Rex Foundation," she said. "Today we're going to learn how to see with our hearts." A little boy raised his hand. "Is it true a dog really saved you?" Emma knelt down, meeting his curious eyes. "Yes," she said softly. "He saw me when I couldn't say a word. And that's what you're all going to learn to do, to listen, to care, and to be brave when someone needs help." The children smiled, and the boy whispered, "I think I want to be like Rex." Emma's heart swelled. "You already are," she said. As the day began and laughter filled the air, Emma glanced once more at the statue in the courtyard. Sunlight glowed across its bronze fur, and for a heartbeat, It almost seemed alive. She smiled, whispering the words that had once echoed through a courtroom, through a nation, and through the hearts of millions. He saw my heart. And somewhere, in memory, in spirit, in every brave act born of love, that heart still beat. Because some stories never end. They just keep saving lives.